Hello and welcome. Is America rethinking its status as the world's remaining superpower? It's a message the US Secretary of State and former First Lady Hillary Clinton seems to be sending out. Just before her recent trip to India, she argued that America was leaving behind its multipolar view of the world and embarking upon a multi-partner strategy.
Our approach to foreign policy must reflect the world as it is, not as it used to be. It does not make sense to adapt a 19th century concert of powers or a 20th century balance of power strategy. We cannot go back to Cold War containment or to unilateralism.
Well, US President Barack Obama has set an ambitious global agenda, saying he would talk to Iran and Syria, both countries President George Bush had labeled as part of the axis of evil. He also has taken a different approach to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and seems determined to get the Middle East peace process restarted. This comes on the heels of a series of efforts to repair relations with Russia and EU countries. But there are those who question whether or not President Obama's policies actually differ from those of his predecessors. On today's show, we ask, how much real change has there been in US policy, and could the Obama administration's multi-partner vision make a difference? Remember, you can join in our conversation with your questions and comments. Log on to livestation.com/AJE. You can enter the chat room and take part, and we'll also welcome your phone calls into the show. Joining me now are two of the top officials from the administration of President Bill Clinton. US Secretary of State Madeleine Albright was the first woman to hold that position, and during her tenure she played a key role in crafting America's response to the wars in the Balkans and was a strong proponent of NATO. Sandy Berger served as President Clinton's national security advisor, where he helped to formulate foreign policy and played a significant role in Mr. Clinton's attempts to forge a Middle East peace agreement. Both Mr. Berger and Secretary Albright have recently combined forces by merging their two companies. The newly created Albright-Stonebridge Group will be based in Washington, D.C., with offices in Europe, China, India and Brazil. I welcome you both to the show.
Great to be with you.
Good to be with you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, if I could start with you and ask if you think that Secretary of State Hillary Clinton made a major slip with her comments in Thailand recently on the subject of Iran, where she was saying basically that, well, she was acknowledging an Iran with nuclear weapons in effect if America helps build an umbrella defense system in the region. Isn't she effectively validating the idea of a sort of nuclear empowered Iran that way?
No, I don't think so. I think that what she was doing is to make clear that Iran, if they think, the Iranian leaders, that they will be safer or dominate the whole area as a result of whatever they're doing in their nuclear program, that they're mistaken. And I think that it was kind of a warning to them to understand that that would not guarantee that they would be a threat to the whole region.
Well, ma'am, a question we got from one of our viewers, and on this show we try to get the viewer questions in, that came in through Twitter from Aisha in Bangladesh, says, don't you think the US should change its policy on Iran? You've been blunt about that in the past. Now, is America willing to accept a nuclear Iran, do you think?
I think that the United States and President Obama has made very clear that nuclear proliferation is one of the issues that he's going to spend a lot of time on. He gave a major speech on that in Prague, and then they had a discussion, obviously, in Moscow about limiting nuclear weapons generally. Therefore, a nuclear-armed Iran does not fit into that particular picture. And President Obama and Secretary Clinton have made clear many times that a nuclear-armed Iran is not something that is acceptable.
Sandy Berger, Mr. Berger, good to have you with us as well, sir.
Good to be with you.
We saw events developing dramatically in Iran recently in the past month, with the US hoping they would go much further than they did. But with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad re-elected, is there any argument for the US to be more active in, I guess, in effectively undermining the current government in a way, I guess, similar to that advocated by the Bush administration? I mean, should Barack Obama be continuing a policy of trying to push for change there?
Well, I think what is happening in Iran after the election is profound. I think the status quo ante is dead. I think fundamental change is underway. The United States and the President has made very clear the appalling nature of the election and what has transpired since the election, and that we stand with the students and the opposition as they assert their rights. It is not in our interest to interfere with the internal affairs of Iran, but it is in our interest to stand solidly with the opposition as they assert their basic rights.
How do you regard, sir, this idea of America engaging its approach to a multi-partner world as opposed to the multipolar world, as was stated by Secretary Clinton? I mean, is America effectively abdicating its responsibilities here?
Hardly. I mean, the fact of the matter is that although there are more powers and there's more dispersion of power in the world, the United States is still the most important country in the world. none of these problems that we're dealing with, from non-proliferation to climate change to security issues, can be dealt with without the United States. My colleague, Secretary Albright, used to talk about the indispensable nation. Whether that's the right phrase or not, it certainly, I think, is still the case. That very little can get done in the world without the United States. Now, what President Obama has made clear and Secretary Clinton has made clear is that acting alone, there are very few problems we can solve. We have to work in partnership with others. We have to forge coalitions on big coalitions and small coalitions to deal effectively with the kind of problems that we're facing today.
Well, Madam Secretary, of course, you know what it's like to be out there. Every word is scrutinized. And I wonder, with what Hillary Clinton, Secretary Clinton was saying recently in India, again, was that seen as a diplomatic blunder on her part, you know, claiming that the remaining plotters of the 9/11 attacks were residing in Pakistan? Of course, it was a bit of a slap in the face for Islamabad. And I wonder what implication that might have on the US-Pakistan relationship.
Well, I think the part that's very, very important to recognize, and I think Mr. Berger and I understood this when we were in office, it is important to tell it like it is. I think that there is an understanding that certain things have to be said. There is a diplomatic approach, but I think that she is stating from what she sees as a fact. And I think she had a very, very good visit in India in terms of understanding that relationship as one that does the multi-partner aspect of it, of really reaching out to the world's largest democracy, we the oldest and India the largest. I think it was a really good visit. We
had a question that came in by email, if I may put this to you, please. It's from Alia Mohammed in Michigan here in the US, who says, do you think Pakistan's security forces are now actively working to defeat the Taliban after what happened in the Swat Valley? And what should the US be doing to help stabilize that country?
Well, I do think Pakistan is an incredibly complicated situation in terms of a country that has poverty, a government that is divided in some ways, some extremism, located in a very, very difficult place. And from what I have read, and I know nothing beyond what I read in the newspapers or see on TV, is that they have really begun to push much harder in order to go at the Taliban in the Swat area, Fatah, and turning their attention to the West and really working harder on it. But this is the major issue, is how Pakistan sees its national interest and how they jibe with American national interests, and how, in fact, the Pakistan-Afghanistan story is dealt with together. And I do think that the United States needs to have a consistent policy towards Pakistan. It's a very important country to us, and it is very important to develop a sense of trust and stability.
On this point, Mr. Berger, there was the comments by President Obama early on in his tenure in the White House, where he described the issues in Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq as being interlinked, saying that they should be dealt with as one sort of common issue rather than being separate problems and dealt with separately. It should be a unified effort. Now, it's something he said that President Bush did wrong, that he tried to treat each thing separately and didn't take the holistic approach. Was that criticism fair, and what sort of implications could this holistic approach have on?
Well, all these issues are interrelated. We cannot deal with Afghanistan without the support and assistance of Pakistan. If we are simply fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan without the assistance of the Pakistanis in the border areas, we will fail. By the same token, Iran has a significant interest in what happens in Afghanistan, and in the past we've cooperated with Iran, and we've indicated that we're prepared to cooperate again with Iran. The poppy crop that comes from Afghanistan goes through Iran, and the President has wrap these together and appointing Richard Holbrooke, a very talented and skillful diplomat, as our ambassador to the region, and he is dealing with all of these issues together. He's in the region now to do that.
We're squeezing a call before we take a break. We've got Ahmed in Somalia on the line. Ahmed, what would you like to ask?
Yeah, I would like to ask, why is Somalia always so neglected by the international community? You know, this war has been going on for almost 20 years. And I see some similar ideas like in Afghanistan. Afghanistan was neglected for so many years, and when the problem came to the American doorstep, that's when the American went to Iraq, went to Afghanistan. How long will Somalia be neglected?
Ahmed, I'll put that first to Mr. Berger, and then perhaps get Secretary Albright to respond.
Well, I think it's a fair point. I think that we have not had a consistent approach to Somalia. We've learned again with the pirate situation that what happens in Somalia obviously doesn't stay in Somalia. And so I think the caller makes a very fair point that we need a more consistent and integrated approach to our policy towards Somalia.
And Secretary Albright, a thought on this: is it because one country may be more strategic than the other? Is it, or is there an equal status for all countries in this case?
Well, I do think that we know that the Horn of Africa is one of the strategic areas. We actually, Mr. Berger and I spent quite a lot of time on Somalia at various periods. I do think that there is an increasing recognition that some of the problems in terms of harboring terrorists and various problems have shifted to Somalia. And as I have been reading, I think that there is an increased interest in Somalia. It is clearly a very troubled area and one that is very important strategically. What is hard is that there are so many areas in the world that are demanding attention from the United States, and I think that the approach that Secretary Clinton and President Obama are taking is to recognize the fact that there are other areas, that we can't just be focused on Iraq, for instance. And the regional approach that you asked Sandy Berger about, I think, is something this administration wants to see things as a whole. And Somalia is right across the sea from some of the other areas, so it's all integrated, I believe.
We're going to ask you both to stand by. We're going to take a very short break here. As we pause, let me remind you, you can join the conversation with your questions and comments by logging on to livestation.com and entering the chat room. You can see the debates taking place in there right now. We'll be right back.